We have the Honorable Zoe Lofgren, Congresswoman of the 19th District, and we'd like to give the legislators who are present an opportunity to respond to what they've heard today. So we'll begin with Congresswoman Lofgren. Please welcome her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first, let me say thanks to all of you for this call to action. You know, it's to say that assaults in the military is a serious problem is to understate the scope of the issue. The Department of Defense estimates that there were over 19,000 sexual assaults in the military in 2010. Only a small fraction actually reported. And although we have benefited from the wisdom of our presenters here this afternoon, the victims of assault are both men and women. And this is something that should involve all of us. It is certainly a woman's issue, but it is not only a woman's issue. It's about everybody's family. It's about the brothers and fathers, mothers of those who have been assaulted. It is something that should unite Americans. This is not acceptable. We know that a tremendous number of veterans, especially women veterans who have been raped, suffer from PTSD. In fact, that is a major cause of PTSD among women veterans. So what is happening in the Congress to address this issue? I'm glad to say that there are a number of bills that are beginning to deal with this. First, H.R. 1593, the Sexual Assault Training Oversight and Prevention Act, which is authored, I'm a co-sponsor, but Congresswoman Jackie Spear is the lead author just to the north. It ensures that jurisdiction over reporting, oversight, and investigation of victim care involved with sexual assaults is given to a newly created Sexual Oversight and Response Office rather than the usual military chain of command, which I think addresses some of the issues that I've just heard. We have H.R. 671, the Ruth Moore Act of 2013, introduced by Congresswoman, notice that that is a theme, Shelley Pingree, and of course I'm also a co-sponsor of this bill that assists victims of military sexual assault in getting VA disability by allowing the statement of a survivor to be considered sufficient evidence that the assault occurred. We also have H.R. 2016, the Military Justice Improvement Act, which is the House version of Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's bill, which has had a lot of national attention. It calls for trials to be handled by commissioned officers outside of the accused party's chain of command. The bill also removes the commanding officer's ability to overturn a conviction in a sexual assault case, and of course I am also a co-sponsor of that bill. And finally, H.R. 1079, the Military Judicial Reform Act, again, the primary author being our own Jackie Spear, which ensures that an issued sentence is upheld. It prevents commanders from overturning or reducing sentences, and it's inspired, of course, by the highly publicized case of a lieutenant general at Aviano Air Base in Italy who threw out the verdict in the sexual assault conviction of an officer who was sentenced by a jury to a year in prison and dismissal from service. And of course, I'm also a co-sponsor of this bill. I'd like to say that these bills are not yet law, and if they are law, they're not enough. One of the things that I take some heart in are the number of women in the House and the Senate who have benefited from the voices that we've heard and who are with new energy leading us in this fight. Because the Congress is organized by committees, the people who serve on the Armed Services Committee are on the front lines of this fight. And it's good to know that there are so many strong women in the House of Representatives that serve on the House Armed Services Committee. Here from California, Jackie Spear, just from the north, Congresswoman Susan Davis, down from San Diego, who's been very active on this as well. Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez from Orange County, who's been so forceful. But they're joined by Carol Shea Porter from New Hampshire, Colleen Hanabusa from Hawaii, Nikki Songas from Massachusetts, Marian Bordello, who's the representative from Guam, and finally, our own Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth, who lost both of her legs while serving in the armed services in Iraq. These women are, we have entrusted to lead us in this fight. I know that we need legislation, but we also need a change in the culture. We need accountability, and we need to make sure that when a woman enters the armed services, that her enemy is the enemy of the United States, not someone else that she serves with. That is going to be, thank you. That is our challenge, and we need to remember that victims come first. We've made great progress. We haven't solved every problem, but we have made progress in civilian life. We cannot rest until we have eradicated this unacceptable wave of sexual violence against women who serve in the military. I would just finally like to close by saying that what you're doing here today is enormously important. You know, there are a million things that people are working on in the government, and we don't know everything that's going on. It's the voices of people who are saying this has to be attended to that make sure that the government turns and says this is a priority. And so you're part of making that happen. I thank you for what you're doing, and I know that it matters to you, it matters to me. All I can say is I promise my best efforts, I'll do my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to invite Lindsay Sin forward for her remarks. Lindsay Sin is the Deputy Secretary for Women's Affairs for the California Department of Veteran Affairs. They are doing enormous work in terms of raising awareness about the needs of women veterans. So please welcome Deputy Secretary Lindsay Sin.
Yay, Lindsay. Thank you very much. I'd first like to say thank you to Santa Clara County and to the Office of Women's Policy and to the Moffett Field Collaborative for organizing and hosting this event today about such a very important issue. I'd also like to make a few comments about the presentation you just saw. I hope one of the takeaways that you get from today is that experiencing rape in the military, experiencing rape at all, is not shameful. Perpetrating rape is shameful.
Thank you.
Covering up rape is shameful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And it tarnishes the military that we have all agreed to and have all sacrificed so much for, the military that we love so much. Whether we're civilians, whether we've actually served in the military or currently serving, we don't want to see that in our organization. Of course not. And that's why we need to eradicate this scourge once and for all and completely. And we've been trying to do so for a long time, but we failed. So we have to do more. And that's why we're here today. So there are some themes that I'd like to cover today to kind of recap these presentations. One is that sexual harassment and assault is an ongoing and current issue. Some people talk about having experienced sexual assault, some of our panelists, many, many years ago, but it's happening today. As Katie Weber mentioned, 70 individuals a day, men and women, are raped in the military currently. Additionally, this is a male and female issue. 1 in 100 men experience this as well. Actually, far more men, because they're disproportionately represented in the military, have experienced this. We can't forget that. But it's also a gender issue, because so many more women are likely to have experienced this. Our percentage is so much higher and at risk for this, that we absolutely should be outraged. All of our communities should be outraged. Our women's organizations should be outraged by this. And for that reason, we can't just expect survivors to continue to advocate for themselves. We can't just expect the veterans community to advocate for this. Nor can we expect Congress to fix all of these issues, to accomplish a cultural change as an outside organization, not actually being in the military. It's up to all of us, because these individuals, survivors of sexual assault, come back to our communities. They need to have our support because they're accessing mental health care, they're accessing health care, and more than anything, they want to be successful. They want to be self-sufficient. They want to continue to advocate for others, but while being successful individuals in their own communities. They want to move away from this. And they can't do that if they're constantly seeing reports of increasing numbers of sexual assault in the military. They can't do that when they see commanders overturning the sentences and convictions of individuals already court-martialed for sexual assault. That's impossible to get away from in a social media world where all you have to do is go on Facebook and see everything posted on there, when you look at your Twitter account and it's all over the news. So that's why it's really important for us as a community to be outraged and to continue to drive this fight forward in California. So for that reason, since this is a call to action, if this is what the community wants, if the community is supportive of this and getting behind this, then my office is willing to participate wholeheartedly. We're willing to spearhead this initiative if we need to, so that we can do several things. We'd like to assist in making this a statewide effort. And we'd like to do that by educating the public about sexual assault in the military and the impact that it's having on our communities. And we'd like to also look at current legislation and what other legislation we could possibly propose to address this issue. We'd like to mobilize a grassroots effort so that we can ensure that adequate policy changes are in effect in DoD to actually stop this from happening and prevent further sexual assaults in the military. And we really want to empower participants and survivors to put these on in other communities throughout California. Leaving here today, this cannot be the only time we do this. We have to continue this in California, and that is really our #1 goal. And my office is committed to making sure that we can do that. And so I'd also like to propose that in January of 2014, we hold a luncheon. We host and organize a luncheon in Sacramento as their final wrap-up to a series of momentous events like this that continue to happen throughout California, and that we can recap that and discuss that in the Capitol. So I appreciate all of you being here today for attending this. It takes a lot of courage to come out here if you're a survivor. It also takes a lot of courage to the women that have put this on, to have helped organize this, and to our presenters. So I'd like to give them a round of applause right now. And you can contact my office if you visit calvet.ca.gov. Our contact information is there, and I'll be happy to speak with anybody afterwards. Thank you.
We have Council Member Ash Kalra, who is here today, and he'll share a few words about the presentation and thoughts that he may have at this time.
Well, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. And I don't have much to add in terms of the great information and expertise that's been presented, so I'm just going to speak from the heart and start off by thanking our panelists so much. Certainly more informed, and more importantly, I just want to thank you for your courage in serving our nation, in dealing with what you had to deal with, which is already by itself so traumatic, and then now becoming such great leaders in the face, I'm sure, of great opposition. What you're doing is tremendous, and you're certainly heroes in my book, so thank you all so much. And I want to thank the Office of Women's Policy. I mean, this is one of many, many programs I've seen and been to before that this dialogue wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the Office of Women's Policy. I think we all have to remember that.
True.
And so let's really appreciate the work that's being done. And whenever there's opportunities to fight for the funding for Office of Women's Policy, we all have to be there to support it because this is what we get out of it. Congresswoman Lofgren may have had the lead for another event, but she was kind enough to recognize so many great leaders, particularly female leaders in the U.S. Congress, and I think we must thank her for her great leadership on this issue and so many others, and we're lucky to have her. It's when we think about the military, we have July 4th coming up, of course, and I think rightfully so, we're going to be recognizing and appreciating and honoring our soldiers, honoring our veterans. It's the right thing to do. We should be doing that. And, when we hear, especially when there's discussion about women in combat and whether they should be allowed to fight in the battlefield, which we already know they do, but when it comes to the arguments the other side may make as to whether it's appropriate or not, oftentimes they mention the fact that, well, if they're captured, they may be sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
And we talk about that as a potential outcome under the hands of the enemy. And yet we don't talk about what's happening right now every day in our armed forces. And I think it's important for us, as we would, just as we would stand up, as we stand up for our heroes on July 4th, we need to stand up for our heroes every single day. And that includes all the women that are serving in our military, that have to suffer through so much trauma without the support, as we've heard, that's necessary. I worked in the criminal justice system here for 11 years, and there's still a lot of work to do when it comes to ensuring that victims have all the resources available to them, but it's much better than it used to be. If we even had that much, frankly, if we even had a fraction of what we give and what the emphasis we put on, thanks to Office of Women's Policy, thanks to Domestic Violence Council, and so many others have advocated, if we had a fraction of that for our military women, we'd be leaps and bounds ahead where we are today. So I think some of what was mentioned that I'm taking away certainly is the need for independent oversight, independent investigation is critical. Mm-hmm. The chain of the command is important for certain aspects of the military, right, but we cannot abide by the chain of command when it comes to the sexual assault of women, when it comes to their health and well-being, when it comes to their capacity and ability to get resources, to speak out and ensure that anyone that victimizes someone is going to be investigated and prosecuted under the fullest extent of the law. And we have to ensure, even at the local level, at the county level with the DA's office, with local law enforcement, as we heard, there's so many military personnel that are reserves. We have to understand, what it is that we need to do to support them. When I worked in the criminal justice system, it was very hard for us. I worked in drug court for many years. It was so hard for us, like pulling teeth, to get cooperation from the VA. It was like a separate entity. They didn't like to share information. And it all exemplifies the kind of difficulty it is to get beyond that wall. Then we need to do something about it. And we need to make sure that we do everything we can to break down those walls, because the most important thing is the health and well-being of our soldiers. Whether it's PTSD, whether it's sexual trauma, whatever it might be, we have to make sure everything is available to them in our community. And it is our responsibility locally as much as it is in Washington, D.C. or abroad where they may be serving at any moment in time. And the last thing I want to mention is the role that we all have in ensuring that services are available here. We have to make sure that we support the women that come forward and show the courage to come forward, that we support female veterans if they choose to serve on boards and commissions, run for elected office. It's important to get those voices, as we heard from Congresswoman Lofgren, how it's the female voices in Congress that are speaking up. We need to make sure that the issues of housing, job training, employment, trauma services of domestic violence are available to all women in service as well as veterans. And we have to, I think one thing, and I'll speak certainly as a man, because I think it was interesting when I heard the discussion about how when you gave the presentation in front of 70 men and how well it was received. There's a lot of reasons for it. I'll tell you one, men don't talk about this with each other. Mm-hmm. Men do not talk to each other about these issues. Mm. So when they hear the kind of trauma, they hear the personal story, I think it really impacts them. We need to, as men, start talking to each other more. whether we're in military or not, because we know the issue of sexual assault is all around us. And whatever we can do collectively, so many of you I know, I recognize from different social service agencies, domestic violence, family violence agencies, elected office, working for people out in the community, we have to work together to create those spaces for the men to come together and start talking to deal with the men's issues. Because this is all about men's issues, not women's issues. The women's are the victims here. And finally, this is my final point, is that we have to, as Supervisor Cortese said, step outside of this room. I think most of you here are here because you get it, you understand, or you want to understand. We have to be the boots on the ground for those soldiers, for those veterans, for those women that need us, and for those men that need us. So we have to step outside these doors and not stop talking after today.
Yep.
We have to continue to talk to each other, continue to work with each other, continue to support each other. As a city, I know Councilor Rocha, myself, and others on the council will do whatever we can, certainly make sure we have city resources there. But ultimately, it's about community. It's about each and every one of us working together. So thank you again so much for the opportunity to speak, the opportunity to learn. I look forward to working with all of you in the years to come.
Great.
Thank you.
Final remarks from Councilmember Don Rocha.
I can join in the choruses of the thank yous and the accolades to the folks who put this together, the folks that included me in this. It's an honor to even be invited. The folks who have taken time to come out and support the folks up here talking about this issue. As has been mentioned, it's a very difficult thing to talk about, I'm sure. And the courage in this room is amazing. I'm always impressed by the organizations that step up and do this stuff. So thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name is Don Rocha. I'm a council member of the city of San Jose. And Congresswoman Lofgren spoke to one issue that I was going to speak to really well, and that was just the brief point she made about these dialogues and the importance of these. As an elected official, you get invited to a lot of different events, a lot of different topics. You get asked to speak to a lot of different issues. I often decline because I'm really not a big fan of speaking publicly, but on some of these, you really just can't say no. And it's really an important issue that you think is not being spoken about enough. And this is one of those where I was asked to speak, and while I was not excited about it, because again, I'm not a big fan of speaking publicly, I couldn't say no to this issue because someone in my office, Ann Grabowski, is a big proponent of this issue and this fight, and I'm honored to have her working on my staff. So thank you, Ann, for nudging me to do this. And the point that Congresswoman Lofgren spoke about was the dialogue and the importance of this. Silence is deafening. And having the discussion here at this level, talking about this issue, is how we get things moving. You can point to a couple other issues here recently at the federal level, such as immigration reform, such as marriage equality, where really the discussion happened at the grassroots and community level, and it pushed the folks at the federal level for action finally. And I think this is one of those issues where it's going to have to happen that way. We're going to have to push upwards, because I don't think we're getting the support, or at least you're not getting the support at the top that you need. So as Councilmember Kalra just spoke about, we've got to talk about this issue once we get outside this room. We've got to be advocates, and we've got to push, and we've got to be loud about it, because I don't think folks are going to hear us unless we're pushing. So thank you again for having me here. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a big thanks to our panel and all the members of our legislature here, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, Councilmember Kalra, Councilmember Rocha, and everyone who is here today. We look forward to the work that lies ahead with all of you. I also neglected to acknowledge the agencies who are here in the breezeway that have tables. We do have very important resources, including the YWCA Rape Crisis Center, Community Solutions Sexual Assault Center. We have folks from different agencies, Next Door Solution, First Five. They are available. They will speak with you outside, and we do encourage you to visit the tables. And finally, we want to thank all of you who are here today. As we head into the July 4th holiday, please take a moment to remember the 1 in 5 military women and the 1 in 100 military men who live with MST and trauma today. We owe them and all the honorable women and men who serve our country the deepest gratitude for their service. You are not invisible, and you are not forgotten, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.